What's going on, folks? It's your boy Javier Javier with the Javier Javier Show. Make sure you say it twice. I got my great friend and special guest, very special guest, Michael Regilio in the building. Say what's up, Michael.
What's up, Michael?
Yeah, this is my man's here. We've been on Dogma Debate twice with each other, and we usually have great conversations. We talk in the Facebook Power Polite Movement group. So we decided that we wanted to address the Godfather and how it relates politically in the world and kind of touch on some of the archetypes and the storyline and see if we can relate it to the real world. So Michael is a specialist in Godfather 1 and 2, as he self-proclaimed, and it's my favorite movie as well. So I thought we'd give a whack at it. So how do we best start this off?
Well, I was actually just thinking about this last night. I was like, what is Godfather about? What is it really about? And I came to the conclusion that it's about one man's journey, that it's almost the nature versus nurture argument. That Michael Corleone is introduced to us as a noble man, a noble character. He's upstanding. His family is the mob, but he's not. He, as you know, joined the Marines and went and fought in World War II against his family's wishes. He says to Kay at the beginning of the movie, "That's my family. That's not me, Kay. I'm not like that." And he's clearly a different kind of guy. And over the course of these films, we see that he actually, because of maybe circumstances that he's thrown into, and also just the world that he lives in, that he's turned even more hard and callous than even his father or his brothers had become. Like, you can't imagine Don Corleone having Fredo killed, you know. But Michael Corleone becomes a cold-hearted, a stone-cold person with no emotions, no love for his wife, no love for his brother. He's destroyed by the world that he's in. I think that is really the story. It's the story of the human condition more than it is, and the mob and the politics and all that. That's the canvas on which they paint. But the actual story is one of all of us, that we're flawed people, and maybe we're not as noble and as good as we think we are. We just happen to have been lucky enough to have been in the circumstances that allow us to be. Maybe, or maybe he's just a piece of waiting to turn into a piece of shit.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about Godfather. It can be looked at through so many lenses because the story plot is so deep. It's multifaceted. So the way I see Michael is, I don't think Michael changes. I think Michael is the same Michael that we meet from the very beginning.
Oh.
I think Michael is so obsessed with getting out of the mafia. He's so obsessed with being the guy that he used to be, and he wants to get out. And he keeps telling himself, if I could just finish this, if I can just overcome this, then I can get out. But the further he goes deeper in, the harder it becomes to actually get out, if that makes any sense. So I think
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's a really interesting take, yeah.
See, that's why I thought that Godfather 3 was very important, because it actually shows you that Michael says in Godfather 3, the further I get and the higher I go up, the more corrupt it becomes. And this is when I think it really relates to politics. Like you said, Michael started off innocent, and then look how corrupt he became as he went along. So I asked myself, how many of our politicians start off with, I want to help people. I want to, change the world. I want to actually do good in the world. And then you get involved with this corrupt system, and it just takes the life out of you,
Yeah. And it takes the soul out of you. It's interesting. I mean, the movie starts with political comparisons from the very beginning. Michael Corleone says to Kay, "My father's no different than any other powerful man, Kay, like a president or a senator." She says, "Oh, Michael, you're so naive. Presidents and senators don't have people killed." He says, "Now who's being naive, Kay?"
Yeah.
So it does set up that dynamic from the beginning. So I think your reading is really spot on, man. That's good.
Yeah.
But I also do think that he's not the same person. I think he is corrupted by the system and by the mob and by the power. Power corrupts, and I can't remember who said it now, but somebody said, like, a good person doing good and a bad person doing bad is all too easy to explain. But you want to see a good person do bad, give them power, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of like the religious argument. Like you need religion to, to get a good person to do bad things, you need religion.
Right.
So let's focus in on this exact moment, because there's a moment in the movie where Michael is not a part of the life. And then this exact moment when he decided that he wants to kill Salazzo. I think this is when he decides to kill the police officer in Salazzo. And this is when you see the nature of Michael really reveal itself. It's kind of like this was always who Michael was in a way. He just didn't know it. Because here's a guy who went to the military, he didn't want anything to do with the mafia. And all of a sudden, in one moment, he's ready to kill. He's ready to take life in name of the mafia. How does a person get there? Unless it's in their nature.
I don't know. I mean, you could make the argument that it's in all of our natures. That, I mean, as evolved apes as we are, we know that our closest ancestors, the chimpanzees, are rather intensely violent towards the other tribes. It's tribalism. The chimpanzees have patrols where they'll patrol their territory. If another chimp from another territory tries to come in, I mean, they beat him to death. Yeah. And they'll even go into the other territory sometimes just to make sure the chimps from the other territory know who's boss. They'll have a patrol sneak into the other territory, look for a lone chimp, beat him to death just to send a warning.
That's planning. That's planning.
Yeah. But I mean, it does speak to our nature. I mean, if those are our closest relatives who don't have this cognitive ability to reason, and it's just an instinctual thing, maybe all these things are instinctual in us, which is why I always say, coming from the atheistic point of view, when people say, that without God, there is no morality. I'm like, no, without evolution, there's no morality, because we have to understand where these instincts come from. If you don't understand why it is that you want to punch that guy in the face at the bar for talking to the girl you like or whatever, then you can't reason yourself out of it. If you think you're a perfect being made in God's image and you want to punch somebody in the face, then that must be God's will. But if I'm an evolved ape, and this is just millions of years of evolution, and this is tribalism, and this is competition telling me, punch that competitor in the face, then you can reason yourself out of it. You can say that's just instinct. That's just,
it's a pattern recognition also. It's trial and error. I punched this guy in the face, doesn't turn out good for either one of us. Well, that wasn't good. And we learn from that, and then we decide, well, how would I feel if somebody punched me in the face? It doesn't feel good either. Morality comes as layers of pattern recognition and empathy, and all these different experiences add up and is being taught generation to generation and instilled in us on what we prefer and what we don't prefer. But we getting completely off of the reservation on this one. To bring it back to Godfather. So I kind of agree with you when you said that, Michael changed in a way, because when he go back to see Kay after his first wife dies, he goes back to see Kay, and Kay is like, oh, you're working with your father now. And he's like, oh, my father's business will be legit in a certain amount of years.
5 years.
5 years. So does Michael actually believe what he's saying at that moment, or is he literally buying the dream of the mafia and he's lying to Kay? How do you interpret that scene?
I think he believes it, because then in Godfather 2, when they're living in Nevada, he's dancing with Kay at Anthony's first communion. And she says, I'm reminded of what you told me, Michael. You said that the Corleone family will be completely legit within 5 years. That was 7 years ago. He says, I'm trying, Kate, I'm trying. And the emotion I read on Michael Corleone's face at that time is he means it. I'm trying, Kay, I'm trying. And in fact, in Godfather 3, isn't the Corleone family basically completely legit at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah.
And he gets drawn back in?
Well, pretty much. Yeah, I think Godfather 3, he's completely he's still involved with the mafia, but he's become so legit to where he's more of this overarching legend where people
Yeah.
still have ties to him. He's still respected in the mafia world, but he's not getting down in the mud with what the mafia is actually doing. And so he actually has this moment where he's trying to put all the ties to rest. And he said, I'm going to pay off the people. I'm going to give people this territory. I'm going to relieve all my debts with the mafia, and I'm going straight legit. And it doesn't work out so well.
Yeah.
Was it Joey Zazie? Joey, it's been
Zaza.
Zaza, you know, and
Bad character, bad acting. It's all so bad for me.
and definitely. And I think when I bring up Godfather 3, most people say, okay, that's a garbage movie. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with them, but I wanted people to see that what Godfather 3 gave us was the resolution we needed. And the resolution and the lesson that we learned from it was you can't lay in bed with these people. You can't get your hands dirty and expect to walk away clean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Michael had done so much damage and so many bad things. If you hurt this family, they got siblings, they got cousins and uncles and brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like with politics. If you look at when Obama told Donald Trump that he would never be president, I think Trump took that personal, you know,
Yeah.
and look at the whole ripple effect of that. And here we are now with Donald Trump as president and everybody's at each other's throats. These things have consequences. You can't just walk away and expect that your past won't come back to haunt you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the message in Godfather 3 too is that Michael Corleone and the life and the mafia life, he used that and he took so much from people. And of course, we saw the toll on him that it was he gave away his soul. But at the end of the movie, the life took away his daughter as well. That these things do spin out of control, and you can't, once you set the wheels in motion, you can't stop them. And he took so much from people. He had so many people killed, and at the end, it was his most valuable possession, the one thing that he would have traded it all for, that was taken from him, his beautiful daughter. So yeah, I can see that.
And it's amazing how the dynamic plays out, because you're following this journey with Michael the whole time. Well, not necessarily at the beginning of Godfather. We're kind of following his father, really. You know, we're introduced to Michael, but we don't know that this is going to turn out to be a Michael Corleone film.
Mm-hmm.
But it shows you that this whole time Michael was killing people. He was getting the hits on people's fathers and brothers and uncles, and it really didn't matter in the overarching theme as we're watching Godfather. We're just like, oh, Michael is one bad dude. But when he loses his daughter at the end of Godfather 3, it's supposed to be this overwhelming flood of emotions of where, look, Michael lost his daughter, his most prized possession. But we didn't feel that way when he was out murdering other family members of people. Where was that same emotion and that heavy toll that it should take on us? Why didn't we feel the same way when he murdered all those guys at the end of Godfather 2?
Exactly. Well, that's the whole thing of it. And that's how it kind of relates to politics and even Trump, is that when we're watching Godfather, we're literally rooting for the bad. I mean, they're all bad guys.
Yeah.
But at the end of Godfather 1, when he settles all business with the 5 families and he has everybody assassinated, I don't know anyone in the movie theater that's going, oh, this is terrible. Killing is wrong. Everyone's going, this is cool.
Right?
Yeah. Take those motherfuckers out, you know? And I think that in a lot of ways speaks to the mentality of Trump supporters. You know, they don't see, I mean, many of them do see Trump as benevolent and chosen by God. But I think more than anything, he's taking out those damn liberals, those snowflakes, you know. He's paying punishment onto them, and they're cheering for him in the same way that we cheer for Michael Corleone taking out the heads of the 5 families at the end, you know? I mean, what are we crazy? We're cheering on mob violence, you know, but we are at the end. We're like, oh, this is cool, you know? And I think that in a lot of ways that is the mentality of Trump supporters. Like, this is good. He's killing the competitors, you know? I mean, it is tribalism. And right now we're seeing that probably more than we've seen it in a long time in this country.
Yeah, and there's an element to it. Like, you know, I'm a Trump guy, or I voted for Trump, right? And there's this divide about, well, how can conservatives actually vote for Trump? Trump is not a conservative. Trump is not these things. And if you look at Michael Corleone, he wasn't a mobster. He wasn't his father. He's completely different than what we knew from the original Godfather. Totally different personality, totally different approach. But yet we sign on to Michael Corleone's way of doing things because we somehow feel invested already into the empire that his father left behind. But but is this really the same mafia that we know? Is this really the same conservatism that we knew? And we have to wrestle with that. We have to wrestle with this. Can we go back to the way it used to be? Should we? Or should we allow this new guy to come in and completely transform what it meant to be, mafioso or Cosa Nostra or whatever the case may be?
I think that's an interesting point. I think you just made me think of something as you were saying that. I think that obviously there's no going back after Trump. Things will never be the same. And you and I could probably agree that there's some good in that. And there's a lot of bad in that too. But Trump's presidency has been really interesting in that, there's no going back after the pandemic to the old way it was before. I mean, hopefully we'll get back close to the old way it was before, but everybody has a new mentality after this. Maybe not just as it comes to social distancing, but as it comes to economics. And I mean, it seems like one presidency has changed America so fundamentally. And for better or for worse, we will see. But the comparisons to Donald Trump and mob bosses are salient. They are salient, sir.
And it's funny because there are conservatives who will say, no, it's not. But then there's conservatives who will say, that's what we like about him. So, but also I want to point out this. It also reveals how vulnerable we are in this society. Because like you said, one term of a presidency can completely change the fabric of America.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder, like, everything that we appreciate, everything that we take advantage of and take for granted could be gone just like this in 4 years or less.
Yeah.
So the system needs to be fixed somehow. And I was under the impression that Donald Trump would shake up the system so much that people on the left and people on the right would say, we got to fix this thing. We got to come together and find a way to really fix the system. But I must have been mistaken in my in my thesis, I guess, because I feel like it's only pushed people further away.
For the time being, but I have noticed that when I talk to anybody, see, I am a big money in politics guy. I don't know if you've read the book Dark Money, but I mean, it chronicles and explains to you exactly how these billionaires and corporations funnel money into the political system to get what they want, which they've been doing for about 40 years now, which is why, as you watch with starting in the 70s. Yeah, absolutely. And Donald Trump even says, I've bought a lot of politicians in my day. They all come around looking for money, which I love because he was calling out the system, but then he just became part of the problem, which is, again, you want to talk about like a theme that we've seen in literature and in cinema a million times is the person who comes up with the solution then becomes the same problem. The Who said it best. Here comes the old boss, same as here comes the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in Godfather too, because it takes place in Cuba, or I mean, there's a section in Cuba, which is the corrupt government is overthrown by a government that ultimately, as we know, the Castro regime becomes equally as corrupt and more oppressive than the government that they overthrew, And I think Donald Trump is some evidence of that. I mean, Donald Trump, his style is very mob boss. I mean, very mob boss.
I mean, look at the letter he wrote.
I mean, loyalty is everything to Trump, just like a mob boss. In fact, Comey, when he was investigating Trump, went on the record saying that he had flashbacks to his days of prosecuting the mafia, that this guy had a similar style. And then his successor, Andrew McCabe, said the same thing, that this guy, he runs his organizations identical to a mob organization.
Yeah, who was that said that you know what Trump means when he says certain things. Like, he doesn't say it.
Michael Cohen.
Yeah,
The code, speaking in code. And when you listen to the mob bosses, you know, I mean, I'll take a page out of like Goodfellas because I don't have one immediately for Godfather off the top of my head, but you know, yeah, you know, that thing we were talking about, the guy from over, you know, well, he's gonna, okay, we're gonna, you know, and they never speak about, they never actually say it. In fact, not Andrew McCabe, Don McGahn, White House counsel, he stated that he was, when he first started working with Donald Trump, he was taking notes, and Trump said, "What are you doing taking notes? Lawyers don't take notes." And McCabe said, "No, all lawyers take notes." And Donald Trump said, "None of the lawyers I've ever worked with take notes." And that's because the lawyers that Trump worked with was Roy Cohen.
That's Tom Hagen.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't take notes when you're working for the mob. But Donald Trump was correct that the lawyers he worked with didn't take notes, because the lawyers he worked with, most notably Roy Cohen, defended Gotti and a few other mob bosses. So
yeah, that was interesting when the impeachment thing came up, and some of the lawyers that was actually representing Donald Trump, it made me really consider, like, it made me really stop to think, like, even if these are good lawyers, I mean, it doesn't help the narrative. But hey, maybe that's what you needed. but it does.
You know that Roger Stone quite literally brought our discussion home when he, you know, he was, one of the things he was prosecuted for was witness intimidation. And the guy from WikiLeaks, I believe it was, that he was talking to, he didn't want him to reveal that he was coordinating with him. And one of the letters that he sent to him, or the emails he sent to him, was he told him to pull a Pantangeli. He literally wrote to the guy and said, "I want you to kill yourself." Like Frank Pantangeli did, rather than testify again.
Godfather too. Yeah.
And then they got that letter. That this, like I said, it is trial where he was convicted of witness intimidation. The prosecution wanted to play the Pantangeli scene of Tom Hagen talking him into killing himself, so the jury understood what Stone meant when he said, "You need to pull a Frank Pantangeli." And the judge said, and the defense argued, no. If you play that scene from The Godfather, they're going to immediately associate our client with the mob. That's not fair. And so the judge said, no, you can't play the scene, but he let the jury read the actual or the screenplay, the scene from the screenplay. So they read it, so they understood what he meant when he said,
they knew if they played the scene, it would be much more graphic than actually reading it, because you would actually
it would implant an image in the jury's head that this guy is a mob boss. Yeah, but Roger Stone even said, pull a Pantangeli. So Godfather literally came, the imaginary world of The Godfather literally came crashing into reality with the Roger Stone trial. So, yeah.
So, like you said, these guys speak in code. Just like you said, you couldn't think of a actual quote from The Godfather, but the famous one of all is, "I make him an offer he can't refuse." It's like, you know, we know what that means, but like it could mean something else, but we know what it means, right?
Yeah.
So
but even in the tape that Cohen released, in which Trump was instructing him to pay off Stormy Daniels, they had to translate it because he was speaking in code. You know, and look, again, I would be willing to bet that powerful politicians also speak in code to their underlings to make sure it's, you know, what is it called? Believable deniability or whatever.
Basically. Now, let me ask you this, because I want to tie this to Trump. We just talked about how Trump has these mafia-like qualities. Does that make him a good politician? Does that make him an effective politician? Because let's say Trump used the same tactics to actually get done what liberals wanted. Let's say Trump was actually trying to get universal health care and all these things done. Trump will probably be able to pull it off.
I don't think so. Trump hasn't pulled off anything other than what any Republican president could have done with the help of Mitch McConnell, is the Supreme Court judges and the federal court judges. The only thing, look, is when it comes to the Trump presidency, it's always so obvious to me what he was there for. He promised the wall, never happened. He promised infrastructure, has yet to happen. I mean, everything he promised he didn't get, except those permanent tax cuts for the millionaires and billionaires, those permanent tax cuts for the corporations,
now,
and those temporary tax cuts for you and me.
You know we finna disagree now. Now
I don't know how we can disagree. What else has he done?
Because the wall is getting built. Now
it's not. There's no wall. He doesn't have the funding.
But they're not building. So am I confused that there hasn't been multiple sightings or videos of the wall actually being put up in a lot of places, or is that
there's maintenance on the there already is a wall, right? There's a lot of maintenance.
Certain areas.
Yeah, so they're doing there's some building, there's maintenance. But as far as I can't remember what the ultimate price tag was that they said to build the actual wall he wanted. He never got the funding for that. It's not being built. And even if it was built, it's worthless. It's not going to do anything. That wall is it's just a symbol. It's just a symbol of the Zionistic, xenophobic wants of his base.
Not everyone though.
Symbol.
Not everyone.
Stay out.
Not everyone though. There are going to be xenophobic people, but I think there are really genuine people who actually are concerned about illegal immigration. People who probably deal with it on the border or have had a family member killed by an illegal immigrant. There are actual people who are concerned. I don't think it's all out of hatred. Or what about,
when you're talking about a country of 350 million people and you give examples of a few people, it's, that's statistically, nothing. I'm sure there are people who've had their somebody killed by a illegal alien or an undocumented worker or whatever terminology you want to use. I don't get hung up on the terminology like other liberals do.
Yeah. But there's also competition for jobs. If you live in certain areas, there's competition for illegal immigrants and jobs. Me personally, there are a lot of people that I know who went for certain jobs and they couldn't get them because they were hiring the illegal immigrants under the table to do those jobs. And they take advantage of those illegal immigrants as well, which does lend a argument that maybe we should be working on reforming the immigration system and getting these guys legalized. That way they can't be taken advantage of.
Oh, look at you, you little liberal. Thank you. That's what I say.
There's always been conservative Democrats. There's been liberal Republicans. I just think
no, not anymore.
Not anymore.
There always were. They're gone. Yeah. They're gone. Yeah.
They're gone, and we're gonna bring them back. Because I don't care about this whole conservatives must be Republican thing. I'm all about effective solutions, and if you got 10 things that work for me, I'm with it. Especially if it aligns with my values. And I just don't think that sometimes these things actually align with conservative values. I think we're just going along with the tribalistic mentality of, well, the Republicans said it, therefore it must be okay. Now, there are a lot of things that the Republicans say that I agree with. And there are a lot of things that the liberals have on their plate that I agree with. And I don't think we should just overlook them because a liberal said it.
Right.
But we getting off, and we're supposed to talk about Godfather.
Well, but when you talk about the wall, though, that is an interesting aspect because in Godfather 2, we see what it took to become an American citizen in 1910 when Vito Corleone came to America, which is just show up and you're in. It's the melting pot. Everyone's welcome. I can't remember what year it was, but it was like until 1965. If you were in this country and you wanted citizenship, you just went to any federal building.
They didn't even have names. They were giving out names.
Yeah. And this is, again, I always say to particularly MAGA guys, when you say make America great again, when are you talking about? Because you can look at any period of time in American history when you called it great, that the policies were far more aligned with what liberals are talking about nowadays. And again, when the immigrants that built this country and made it great, and many of the MAGA guys are the grandsons and granddaughters of these immigrants, all they had to do was just show up.
I think what's most important is how you frame the discussion. And I think what it is because I think the proper counter argument to that is, we want we want immigrants to come when we invite them. we should be able to choose when we invite immigrants and when we don't. Now, if work needs to be done, we need immigrants. I don't think all the immigrants have to be skilled workers, and I think many of these people are actually trying to avoid, crime or corruption in their own countries, and they're fearing for their lives. Who am I to ignore real humans having real issues and they need protection? And I think America's job is to conserve the ideals of our forefathers or the people that came before us, and that means taking care of the least amongst us.
Right.
So there are problems I have with the argument.
Right.
As far as,
wouldn't you say though, as long as I promise we'll try and get it back to the Godfather, but you did make a point that I think I have to push back on a little bit. So you said that the undocumented workers here are taking away American jobs.
Not necessarily.
You said you know some people, and but that is, let's say not even you said it. I've heard it said by many a conservative. Okay. In fact, I will quote the great show South Park when I say, they took our jobs! But the fact of the matter is, we've talked about public education through the university level before, which is a liberal position and not a conservative position. Wouldn't you say that the system would work if American citizens the reason that we have public education through the high school level is because at the time that we decided to do that, high school education was what it took to compete, not just in the American job market, but on the world job market. Well, now we have a much more globalized system, and the American worker has to compete with the German guy who got free college all the way through university, and the Swedish guy, and the British guy, and the Canadian guy, and the Australian guy, and the French guy, and we're only going through the high school level. Wouldn't you say that if we had a better education system where American workers were educated all the way through the university level, and those were the jobs they were competing with, and we had an immigration system where people were coming into this country, and the first jobs they were getting were the jobs that Americans were overqualified for in a lot of ways, that would ameliorate that issue? That as these people are coming in, taking the jobs in the factories, in the 7-Elevens, or wherever it is, driving the cabs, and the American worker is secure next tier up in a position that he was able to secure because of the fact that as a society, we decided to invest in the education of our workers.
It's like learn the code. Now, I did a video about this a minute ago, and it was about, do I agree with free college and university? And I disagree with it because I understand that if the criteria of what it takes to survive in this society has changed, I think the public education system needs to change with it. I think we should go year round when it comes to schools. I think we are competing on a global scale, and we need to step up the amount of education that our young children are getting in elementary, middle school, and high school. We need to tailor the criteria differently and teach them these skills younger, because the younger you are, the better you are to pick up on certain skills.
Well, maybe, but you're saying, you kind of lock a person into a career for life. The younger you are when you start, let's say, like trade schools, which is a great thing, and I don't have a problem with it whatsoever. But at 15 years of age, God, I wish I could remember who was saying it, but we say to kids, you can be anything you want to be. You can be anything you want to be, and then at 12, 13 years old, we put kids in trade schools and we say, you can be any one of these 4 things. Like, you're limiting a young person's options when you put them into training younger and younger and younger. I think we should leave the options open for them later and later and later, so that as a young adult you can make these decisions, because that's really not until your full frontal cortex is formed can you make important life decisions. I don't know, if 14 or 15 you should be deciding that you don't.
At 18 you're not fully developed either. I don't think you're fully developed until like the age of 25, where your brain is fully reached its development stage. But you're right. I wasn't thinking of it on a strict terms of teach them how to code in middle school. I was more of exposing them to, like right now, my 5-year-old niece knows how to use a laptop. She knows how to use a phone. Basic things that you need to know. How to Google something. You need to know how to do research and how to know fake news versus real news. Like, these are things that you can be exposing them to at a younger age. The only problem I have with college level is so many different people at that moment in your life. It's no longer mandatory in society that you school. At that moment, they say you're a fully grown adult. You can choose to do nothing with your life because you have the freedom to do so. But if you choose to further your education after this moment, you have to take on that responsibility because that's a choice you're making. Now,
right, and it's a lot of responsibility going to university, but why do you have to take on that debt? That's the question.
That's something that we should address because college has been getting more and more and more expensive, and these colleges are increasing their prices is just ridiculous. I think that's something we need to approach. But also, if you're going to make college free, then you should make it mandatory, just like you make elementary and middle school mandatory.
No, it's not. Well, elementary and middle school are, but high schools. When
16.
You say free, I always take issue with the word free. Free is a conservative framing. It's a Sean Hannity framing. They want free stuff. Well, no, we allocate our tax dollars to certain programs. There's clearly a lot of money out there. The Senate, the Congress and Senate and the president just found a couple $1 trillion that they could free up for this pandemic. It's just, where do we allocate all this revenue? We're the richest country in the world, yet we're the only developed country that doesn't have universal health care. We're the only developed country that doesn't have public education through the university level. So it's just a question of priorities. Where is that money going? Is it best spent with tax breaks for the billionaires? Is it best spent for deregulation on the corporations who are polluting the planet, and tax breaks for the corporations? I mean, that is where we decide our priorities are. When you have a Republican in office, when you have somebody of a different ideology in office, they have a different set of priorities. It's always a question of priorities, and so it's not free. Nothing is free. We know that. Obviously, nothing is free. It's a question of where are our priorities? Where do we want to allocate these monies?
Yeah, and I pay taxes, you pay taxes, in hopes that if I'm paying taxes for middle school kids to get educated, I expect that middle school kid to go to class and get educated, because I'm expecting for them to pay off that in society when they get older to actually become working, productive citizens in society. So if I want to allocate our tax money towards free college and university, we as a society should demand that people use it and actually become productive citizens of society. That's one issue that I have with the college or the taxpayer funded university, is I want to make sure that there's an obligation there, that my money will be spent and people will use it and they just won't throw it away. Because at 16 you could drop out of high school, but yet you can't go into the military at 16. You can't, the math is just not adding up in some of these things. But I'm for funding certain things if it comes with certain caveats attached to it, just to make sure that we, like you said, priorities. There are a lot of money that is being allocated in places we don't want our money spent on. I don't care if you're conservative or if you're liberal. We could all agree that the government is not spending our money to the best of its ability to maximize, the production and fulfill the happiness in our communities and our society. And the conversation has been hijacked, basically. It's been hijacked by the wrong people. So that's how me and you, like you said, I'm sitting here saying free, but it may have been framed that way from somebody else. Now I'm using a certain language that I probably wouldn't use if the conversation wasn't being framed that way.
I know. I mean, this is, we're so off the Godfather. And I haven't even done my Frank Pantangeli impression for you yet. But
it always happens. I swear.
But I always have to point out to my conservative friends that it's just mind-blowing to me what a coincidence it is that they are advocating the exact same policies as the billionaires and corporations who fund conservative movement want them to advocate. It's like, even with the pandemic, the corporations and the billionaires are like, get back to work, get into our factories, get into our shops, and get back to fucking work. Make us some fucking money. And all of a sudden, the average conservative's like, we got to get back to work. And it's like, do you not see that you are just, that we can follow the money. We know where the money's coming from, and we know who they're funding. The Koch brothers and others. I mean, that's just the boogeyman name I'm throwing out so you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I get
But,
you.
you know, almost every conservative talking point happens to align exactly with the policies that are advocated for by the people that fund everything in the conservative world, you know?
Well, we could do the
just how
same
it works
thing.
right now.
We could do the same thing with the liberals now, because Democrats have their funders, and Democrat
Big
funders
time.
push certain policies and things that they want. Also, I try not to generalize too much, because I know there are genuine people who need to pay their rent and people who want to go back to work and they got kids to feed. So I try not to just say, oh, these people are out here just following any and everybody that's pushing a narrative. But I do get that there's a level of manipulation
Right.
from the top. I'm not denying that fact, because I just fail to believe that liberals and conservatives are just that much split on all these situations.
Right.
And I mean, it's up to me and you, because I think we're reasonable. We can talk about these issues, and people may not like that I agree with you on a lot of things. That's fine. I don't care. But it's I'm trying to make sense of it, because I'm trying to see, like, liberals want certain things in society, and all of them I don't agree with, but I can't agree with you on certain points that you do make. So this goes back to, what are we willing to compromise on these issues?
Right. Right.
You know, so
we have to have a fair framing of the issues, which we can't get with this filthy money flooding the system and pushing agendas and convincing many people, myself probably included. I'm sure I've fallen for this as well. But which is why I think that we need to get money completely out of politics. You can follow the trend line perfectly. It started in, I believe, the 70s with a case called Buckley v. Viejo, which started to allow money into politics. The final nail in the coffin was Citizens United, where they said you don't even need to know where the money's coming from. That's what's called dark money. That you can have these PACs and whatnot. But you can watch that as soon as the ultra rich and the corporations started having this influence on politics in the 70s, you suddenly see the weakening of the unions, minimum wage no longer keeping up with inflation. Now that's falling down. Deregulation starting to come in. Like, all of a sudden, the people with the money are getting all their policies, and the people that are actually the makers in this country, I can't remember who it was, but somebody used to frame it as the makers and the takers. I know everybody on Fox News does. Who came up with that framing initially, but they've got it exactly backwards.
I think
we are the makers, they are the takers.
I think like Tucker Carlson, now I know he's a Fox host, but he actually touched on this subject. He said you can't actually believe that while the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer, that you don't have to somehow address that issue. And he's talking to conservatives at this moment. And Ben Shapiro disagreed with him, but I understood what Tucker Carlson was saying. He was like, you can't just ignore these issues and act like they're just going to go away. There is a big gap going on between the rich and the poor, and the middle class is being decimated. You have to address this at some point. It can't just be, well, business is business, it's the free market, let them do what they want, because that has real world consequences. You won't have a country. And one thing that concerns me is, what are the rich thinking? And I'm under the impression that they think that the worker will become obsolete at some point because of artificial intelligence, because of, advanced manufacturing. How much will the worker actually matter when this is all said and done? Because I can't understand any other way why they would allow this gap to keep widening, unless they feel at some point we won't need them anymore.
Well, I'm going to bring it back to the original conversation for you at this point. You just take a look at Cuba. And I mean, you say you can't understand what the rich are thinking, that you think it might have to do with artificial intelligence or automation or something like that. But actually, this is a play that we've seen played out a million times in the history of the world. And Cuba was a perfect example of it. The corrupt system that only favored the rich. And eventually the poor said, we've had enough and we're taking over. And then it switched again, because if you don't fix the fundamental problems in the system, you're just going to get the cycle repeating over and over again. Now we're practically at the point that Cuba was in when we saw in The Godfather, when the poor were rising up and the corrupt officials were tone deaf and having a party in the palace as the people were marching in the streets, and they're passing around a golden telephone, and they're completely blind to the needs and wants of the people. And the people said, we will not be ignored. And they were not ignored. And maybe that's what's going to happen here, which is why you have to fix the fundamental problems in the system, which is why I say we have to get money completely out of politics, all the way out of politics, where you don't even give $5 to a politician. We have public funding of politicians like they have in other countries. You get enough signatures on a petition to run for office, and that opens up this much money for you to use to run. Then you get to the next level, that opens up this much. When you're ready to run for president and you're chosen, then that opens up this much money. Everyone has the exact same amount of money, and there is no incentive in that way. And I always tell my conservative friends, then you get real conservatives fighting for real conservative values. Everybody wins under that system.
That's the way
you have
it should
to get
be.
the money in. Yeah.
Everybody should win.
And which is what I was trying to say earlier, which is and you say that it's such a divided country, except on this issue. I have some of the most hardcore MAGA hat wearing, Trump loving relatives in my life. People that I love with all my heart and soul, who are just drunk on the Kool-Aid, on the orange Kool-Aid, as I like to call it. But they and when we start talking about money in politics, everybody agrees. Everybody goes, yeah. But the system is built on money in politics, and that is what the system is fighting for. That's what the system is defending. It doesn't want to let that go. We, the people, the conservative and the liberals who are actually interested in the welfare of this country, should unite under this one issue, and we would have a vastly different political landscape if we did it. And I think it would be a wonderful thing. And it would be a return to those days. I mean, when we talk about Make America Great Again, oftentimes I've asked a lot of people, at least in the case of my relatives, they're talking about the 50s, you know?
I think my understanding of that was when America was actually producing a lot of goods, and America was at the forefront of manufacturing, and, you know, and I don't know how realistic it is that we can think we can return back to those days. It's just the world is more complicated and global.
Of course.
You know,
that actually wasn't what I was going to say. I was going to say during the 50s, it was just common courtesy that politics was not polite conversation. You know, that your politics was your own. You went into the voting booth and you voted. And then when you went to dinner, you didn't even really know what the other guy's political views were, or the other gal's political views were. And nowadays, politics is everything. You walk into a room and you go, guy's got a MAGA hat on. Fuck him! You know?
Yeah. And like, I just don't see how that helps the situation. I just never understood what it would. Why be rude to your opponent? I mean, we're all Americans. I mean,
Trump supporter just asked me, why be rude to your opponent?
Well, look, I criticize Trump supporters all the time. I mean, I call
that is a criticism of Trump. That was a criticism of Donald J.
But
Trump.
Donald,
rude, nasty, arrogant piece of garbage I've never witnessed.
Look, Nancy Pelosi just called Donald Trump. What did she call him? Morbidly obese or something?
Well, I mean, I think he actually is technically obese.
But come on now,
Javier. Let's make a list of every nasty thing Donald Trump has said and every nasty thing Nancy Pelosi has said, and let's weigh those two out. I have a funny feeling it's going to be 1 trillion to 2.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would never argue that Donald Trump had his fair share, if not his overly fair share of, criticism. One thing I think I do criticize the left on is, like, for instance, Donald Trump told the Chinese or the Asian reporter, go ask China. And everybody got outraged, like, oh, it's racism. But people ignore when Donald Trump says things to white men, white Christian men. Donald Trump will criticize them or call them names like Ted Cruz, Lion Ted. He would do all kind of things to these guys.
That's because he's a nasty guy who will attack anybody. Ted Cruz wasn't a Christian man in that moment. Ted Cruz was his opponent in that moment. He wasn't calling him those names because he...
So, but the liberals don't treat it that way. They treat it as he's picking on women. I'm like, no, Donald Trump is picking on anybody who opposes him. In some cases, you got to call racism when it is racism or when it is xenophobia. You can't just act like Donald Trump doesn't do this to everybody just so you can make a point. Look at him. He's sexist. He's sexist. And I just think that sometimes the way you frame the argument against Donald Trump does you a disservice more than it actually helps the liberal cause. And also, I'm always on the defense.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I'm always on the defense when it comes to Donald Trump. But one thing that I was trying to point, I know, but
how could you not be? He puts you on the defensive. You have to spend all your time just defending this clown.
And look, I'll give liberals this. Liberals are very good at putting conservatives on the defense. And I think this even before Trump, even when it was to Bush and so forth, conservatives always try to defend. I'm not racist. I'm not sexist. But we also got to address the left. We also got to address the problems on the left. We have to address the fact of identity politics is not helping your cause. You know, some of the things that's going on college campus when they shouting people down, that's not helping the liberal cause.
But Javier, I mean, I always say that it's really kind of amazing to me that suddenly when I was in college and a young man, it was sort of understood that young people are experimenting and trying new things, and they become very boisterous and loud about their opinions that they just discovered they had 6 months ago. And it's understood that kids go through that, and that kids are experimenting with ideology and politics and all these things, and they become very impassioned, the passion of the young person who just last week figured out that he's, you know, a socialist or whatever. And then it was just understood by adults at that time. And now I turn on Fox News, and suddenly 70-year-old men are obsessed with some 18-year-old kid who they don't even know his name. Like, one kid on a college campus gets up and says something stupid, and it's on the national news that night.
That's the left. That's the left as well. Let's not ignore. Look what happened to the kid that was wearing the MAGA hat. I mean, the CNN and Washington Post and they blew that up as well. I mean,
right.
So
imperfect system. But I mean, that's a good point, and I will give you full credit for that as I'm grading you here. You're doing very well.
Political correctness, I think it's hurting you. I think it's hurting the left. I get that you don't want people to be rude and nasty and hurt and offensive, but also human beings are designed to say, when you tell me not to do something, it makes me want to do it even more. And, you know, liberals are supposed to be the free speech people. It's supposed to be like, yo, I could disagree with you, but I still fight for your right to say whatever it is you want to say. And when we start telling people you have to speak a certain way, I just see disaster. I don't think it's going, it pushes conservatives away.
I don't know that that's completely accurate. I mean, that's the difference between free speech and free of consequence. And I think as a conservative, you would understand that. You have the right to free speech. You don't have the right to say things without consequence, you know? And when you talk about political correctness, I mean, maybe I could see your point that it's bad, that there are bad elements to it, but also it was born out of a much more bigoted time in our society's history that political correctness had to come around, when we had to say, no, you can't talk about women that way. You can't talk about Black people that way. You can't talk about gay people that way, not in the public forum. And if you do, you will not be free of consequence. Yes, you have free speech. Obviously, we know that. You could go watch a Nazi make a speech in the town square somewhere on any given day if they've got the balls, because they know there's a consequence, you know? And I'm not talking about violence or anything like that.
Yeah, I get you. It depends on how you enforce.
About that. And identity politics. Oh, go ahead.
It depends on how you enforce political correctness. I think there's a level of understanding, and then there's a level of you're going too far. You know, now I feel like I can't express myself because if I accidentally say the wrong thing,
I know.
You know, it's like you hold on to every word. Did I say the right thing, or something I said 20 years ago? You know.
Yeah, I know. But that also speaks to technology. You know, that every word you say is forever around, and that suddenly somebody who was powerless, just sitting in their home, you know, living their life, suddenly has the ability to tweet out, "What a piece of shit. Did you see what this guy said?" And then some other bored person sitting in their home can retweet it and retweet it and retweet it. And suddenly, hey, look at us. We've got power. And we're going to prove our power by destroying this guy's life because he said the wrong thing, you know? I'll be honest with you. In this very conversation, when I went to say xenophobic and I said Zionist, I was like, uh-oh. Man, am I in trouble now? Am I in trouble? Did I
You
say the
know,
wrong thing?
I interviewed your friend Mark,
Yeah.
and we had to redo the whole entire interview because he said some things that he may have not wanted to say,
Yeah.
and we had to redo the whole entire interview, and
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of work because he sent me all the interview questions back at me, and I had to chop and edit everything and add my questions back into it.
Oh, wow.
And just because one part of the interview, we talked about a certain sensitive topic, and then he was like, I shouldn't say this because X, Y, and Z. And I was like, how do we live in a society where a man can't express himself without fear of, death or consequences?
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming that on the left. The issue wasn't about the left. It's just I'm trying to help liberals here because I'm trying to tell you from a conservative perspective. When people tell me not to do something or not to say something, it feels better to even. It's tempting to even go further and say it. And I think that's
And I think that is the solution. I mean, somebody who's done enough podcasts like you and I have, at some point you just go, put it all out there, man. Don't edit it. I said it. If I messed up, I'll say I messed up. If you have a problem with the fact that I was inarticulate or inelegant in the way I phrased something, I'm a human being. I make these mistakes. I'm sorry about that. I think that ultimately where we have to get to is where, let's just say with, people sending, texts and whatnot to their lovers and whatnot being used against politicians. Katie Hill, in specific, like, are you kidding me? Like, I say when you run for office, you should just have to send out a dick pic to everybody and be done with it. Everybody has to send a dick pic in order to run for office, and that's it.
No pussy pics.
Nobody's perfect, and everybody's a human being. And the technology allows us to send nude pictures of ourselves to our lovers and whatnot. Why is that a bad thing? It's like, I was actually happy that when Ted Cruz got caught liking a porno video on his Twitter account, that nobody cared. I was like, good. Thank God. Good. I'm glad nobody cared. And I was also proud of Ted Cruz because it was a MILF video. I was like, he's looking at age-appropriate women. This girl in the video is like 50, and Ted's 50. He's like, God, good for Ted. If she was 18 years old, I'd say that's kind of gross, dude. But, the fact that he was looking at an age-appropriate porno video, I was like, good on Ted. And the fact that it didn't cost him his career, and everyone went, who cares? Ted was looking at porn on his phone. Who cares? That was a good thing.
To bring it back to like the Godfather, it's like that mafia mentality is we've created a system to where only the worst amongst us can thrive. It's just not functional because Donald Trump, the fact that Donald Trump made it to where he is right now, it says a lot about America. It says a lot about the government. And I'll be honest, when Donald Trump first announced his presidency, it was no way that I first thought he was going to get it. And halfway there, I was like, all right, Donald Trump is the next president. Now, I know he lost by 3 million votes, but, with that aside,
I was the same way. For one, I was the biggest Donald Trump fan ever, not because I wanted him to be president, but when he started running those early Republican debates, as somebody who hates the Republican Party and wants to see them taken down a peg, I was loving it, dude. I was just like, this guy is amazing. He is destroying the Republican Party, the Republican brand. He's calling out these phonies for what they are. I liked it. And then it was what you and I had the same realization, but we had two different reactions to it. I was one of the first liberals I know to say, this guy's going to win, because I could see this snowball, the same snowball that we saw with Obama, where it's like, this is an unstoppable train. This is a movement. Something is really happening here. And I was one of the first people to say, I don't care what the polls say, man. There's something magnetic is happening with this guy, and he's going to win. Whereas you were like, yes. I was like, oh, no.
Donald Trump is America. And I really believe Donald Trump is if you took America and rolled all the good and bad stuff and just put it into a person, Donald Trump is the perfect representation of America. The guy uses Twitter like a teenager. It's like, this is America. I mean, we're actually looking in the mirror when we see Donald Trump. Like, all our flaws, all of even our entertainment, we're known for our entertainment in America. He's a good entertainer. He's a comedian. He's also very rude. So,
but shouldn't the president represent the best of us?
You would hope so. And look,
I would hope so.
I'm not
I
under
think
the
Barack
impression.
Obama really did that. I think Barack Obama really did represent the best that America has to offer. A man born basically to a single mother, lower middle class, maybe middle class at best, but I mean, without a lot of money, without a lot of advantages in life. I mean, not even a lot of advantages in his political life. His name was Barack Hussein Obama, but because of hard work, determination, he rose up to become the first Black president of the United States of America. He was the American dream personified.
I get that. And
Donald Trump is the opposite. Donald Trump is rich kid,
so.
born with all the advantages in the world, handed everything on a silver platter, and pretending to be the average man. John Kennedy called him a blue-collar billionaire. There's no such thing as a give me a break, man. Donald Trump was born to a millionaire.
You bad for my channel. Because you just ripping into Donald Trump. Look. I always give credit to Obama. What Obama was able to accomplish as becoming the first Black president of the United States, especially where he came from, I would never take that away from him. I think anybody who becomes the president of the United States, there has to be a certain level of respect there. And I know people say that I'm a Trump supporter. I think you're a Trump supporter as well. I think we're all Trump supporters. Just like I thought we were all Obama supporters because we want the president to do a good job. Because if he doesn't, we suffer. But I think the point that I wanted to make was, just like Obama is the American story, I think Trump is also the American story because it shows you that it's okay for a poor man to rise up, but we shouldn't also take it away from a rich man because he was rich. I mean, because there are some rich guys who actually do great work. There are rich people who actually give back and donate.
I'm not saying that there's a problem with being rich, but I'm just saying that the system was originally set up for the rich. In order to vote in the original Constitution, you had to be a white landowning man. That's who the system was set up for. They didn't even want the non-landowners to have the right to vote because they didn't matter. They were the poor. And so the system was always set up for a guy like Donald Trump to take advantage of it. And a guy like Donald Trump did take advantage of it. And we don't even know the extent to which he took advantage of it because we've never seen his grades. We've never seen his tax returns. We don't even know anything about this guy. For all we know, he's a flunky who got terrible grades in school. For all we know, he's a terrible, I mean, we do know he's a terrible businessman. I mean, everything he's ever touched.
Donald Trump is a great marketer. That's what Donald Trump
is. He's a great marketer. Phenomenal marketer.
That's wrapped up in
great
all
marketer.
Yeah,
phenomenal marketer.
I don't care how much money he has. I don't care how he made his money. Donald Trump is a marketer. That's what Donald Trump is good at.
But you should care how he made his money.
Oh, no, of course. I'm not saying I'm not saying that I don't care. I'm saying if he does have money or if he doesn't have money, it wouldn't change the fact that Donald Trump is president because of his marketing.
But that's not why you want to elect a president. And that's what's wrong with the system on both sides, is these cheeseball commercials and these sound bites and these pre-written speeches, which again, Trump was good at bucking that system, you know. But it's just all so phony. And again, it's all Senator Geary. Let's bring it back to the Godfather again, the ultimate hypocrite phony, you know. He's pretending to be, I mean, when you see him smile for the cameras and the way he makes his speeches and everything, he's the oily politician who's also squeezing the mob. I intend to squeeze you, sir. You know, I mean, he's squeezing the mob for monies. He's sleeping with prostitutes, and yet he's putting on this phony face of the politician, you know. And that's the system that I would like to see overturned. I would like to see real Americans. Here's a crazy controversial thing that almost nobody agrees with me on. Maybe you will. I think we should pay politicians way more money, because right now the smartest people in the country are rich because you make money off of your intellectual property. The smartest people are making great money, and to become a congressman or a senator or even a president, it's a pay cut. It's a huge pay cut. So right now what we get is the people who already have the money, very often Donald Trump, who want the power that comes with it. So they've got the money and now they want the power. So you get rich people who want power. What I think we should do is we should pay a wage that is appealing to the smartest people that would say, you know what? I make $15 million a year working for this huge corporation with my big fat brain. Maybe I will take 6 years off and become a United States senator. It pays $3 million a year, $2 million a year. It's a bit of a pay cut, but I can still live on it. I can still afford the lifestyle that I've already set up for myself. President of the United States should make $15 million a year. It's a big job. And I think it will appeal to smarter people who don't have to take the pay cut. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I've never thought about it. I know AOC said something about making more money. The only thing I would say is most politicians have alternative ways of benefiting from their position than just being a senator or a representative,
which is also a problem.
Yeah, like I mean, Obama's making bank right now after stepping out of the presidency. I mean, the man makes bank just doing speeches.
Well, true, and that's all problematic. But it's the lobbying that is the real problem.
Yeah, you're trying to.
Special. Hey, I want a Netflix special. You want a Netflix special. So let's not begrudge Barack Obama for getting a Netflix special.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But the problem is when you go into Congress or you go into the Senate and you make all these connections in Washington for 6, 10, 12 years, and then you leave Washington and then you go to work for a lobbying firm and then you come and use your connections to make money off of, you're basically, what you do is if you go in and you vote for a bunch of legislation that is pro Wall Street and you prove to be a good little boy and you did everything Wall Street wanted, and then you retire from your job in the Senate, bam, you instantly have some cushy job that you're not even qualified for. I think Eric Cantor, who has no experience whatsoever in the financial world, I can't remember exactly what job he was given, but I remember there's an article about it. When he left the House after he was primaried out, he went straight to work for this company making millions of dollars a year for a job which everyone was like, dude, this guy has no education or experience in this whatsoever. It's basically just a long-term bribe, which is Wall Street and the medical companies or the insurance companies or whoever it is whose bidding you're doing when you're in Congress. The second you get out, you are guaranteed a job. It's like with the mob and the mob jobs, somebody will punch in for you, somebody will punch out for you, and you just get a pay. It's laundered money. They just send some laundered, and you just have to wait 6 years, 12 years, and then all this laundered, dirty money comes your way. That's designed that way. Needs to be overturned. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, look how many deals probably was cut to get Joe Biden to become the nomination. Look how many people just dropped out right before, just at the right moment, and what Elizabeth Warren stayed in, the only competition against Bernie Sanders. There's deals being made in the back room that we don't hear about.
Yeah. Well, that's normal, though.
Yeah, I get that, but
I don't also like it, but it's normal.
Yeah, and I think conservatives and liberals agree that there's too much money into the system. Most of the things that we actually want doesn't get done. And for the life of me, I don't understand how we don't all see that there are a lot that we have in common and that we care about, and we just can't sit down and have a conversation about it. And there's just one more point I want to make is, just like The Godfather, there are, look at Michael's older brother, which is Fredo. Fredo's not that smart. Fredo is not, he doesn't have it all. But yet he's running casinos. He's actually, hooking up with the girls, making things happen. That's Washington, D.C. right there. That's how you get senators' sons and, family members getting these positions and benefiting off each other, because it's not that they qualified for it. It's just because they got the right connection. And it breeds an environment where, it's just the president, you used to walk up to the White House and knock on the door and talk to the president. It literally was a time where you could actually walk up and talk to the president of the United States of America. It was never meant to get to this level. And I just don't see how we fix it, honestly. Because me and you can fix it.
I would say get money out of politics. If I could make I would like you to make a recommendation to me, and I'll make a recommendation to you. I recommend you read the book Dark Money. That was an eye-opener for me. And once you read that book, you can't unsee the things you see. And you see the strings. Suddenly you can see the strings, you know what I mean? Like the people being, the marionettes being walked around on the strings, they're invisible to us very often. Once I read that book, I was like, I can see the strings now. I can see where that's being pulled. You know, you learn the code words and you learn what foundation is funded by what group, you know?
Yeah, and I
So
think you should read, if you haven't read already, the 48 Laws of Power.
48 Laws of Power?
Yes.
Oh, we have it, I'm being told.
Yeah, that's a wonderful book to read. I think reading that book, I read that book many times a long time ago, and that was one of the things where I saw Donald Trump was going to become the president of the United States. I saw so many of those laws being applied in his own way that I was just like, yo, this dude is hitting a lot of these laws. And a lot of businessmen actually studied that book. So that'd be something that might open your eyes, like, you know what, Donald Trump does this. Donald Trump does that, you know. So I'll read Dark Money, you read 48 Laws of Power, and then
let's come back and do this again.
That sounds good. Now let me ask you this before you go.
Okay.
What is your thoughts on Joe Biden saying, if you having a hard time deciding between me and Donald Trump, you ain't black?
Well, you and I both know, because we're on a political debate page together, that I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. Yeah. But I will say that you yourself just said people screw up, people say inarticulate things, people are politically incorrect, and we have to let that go. So maybe that was just a case of that. Come on, he's an old guy. I mean, the world has changed around Joe Biden so dramatically that in his world, maybe he didn't even understand. Like, I think he may have been saying, I was the vice president to the first black president. You know, I have the endorsement of the Congressional Black Caucus. You know, if you haven't figured out that I'm the person fighting for the African-American community, then, you know, I think that was what he was trying to say. He was inarticulate, but he's always inarticulate. And that's why we're in for such a rotten, terrible election season. Just a guy who intentionally says the nastiest, worst stuff ever versus a guy who unintentionally says the dumbest shit ever. You
can see it because, like, the right is holding on everything, every ammunition you give them, they're gonna take it. And the left is like, every ammunition you get, we're gonna take it. We're gonna use it to battle each other. And
I know.
Like, imagine if I did what you just did with Joe Biden with Donald Trump. When Donald Trump tried to grab him by the, you know, I could say he's an old man. You know, he came from that time and age where men were doing this and they thought it was okay to do it. He probably just thought, you know, people try to rationalize. I get Joe Biden is not as sharp as he used to be. I mean,
right.
Well, I mean, Joe Biden used to say they want to put y'all back in chains. I mean, he's always said some things that were a little questionable, but I'm not holding it against him. I just, you know, I think it's going to hurt him. You know, sadly, I wish these
I don't think so.
That ain't the vibe I'm getting from a lot of people that I've talked to. But
you talk to a lot of conservatives.
I'm talking about black people. I'm talking about black people, just black people. I mean, most of the black people I know are liberal. I mean, or vote Democrat. And most people black people have a big thing about being told they're not black. That's a big no-no. I mean, I get offended when somebody tell me, how can you vote conservative? You give me your black card. You know, that's a big thing in the black community. So, but it may not hurt him as much as I think it is. It's anecdotal evidence. So I'm not saying that it's going to hurt him on a mass scale. If you talk to your boy and just tell him, keep your mouth closed a little bit.
I mean, I made the joke when the pandemic hit. I was like, Joe Biden can't do rallies, can't make speeches, can't do interviews, or as his campaign called it, the greatest thing that's ever happened to us, you know? Just, if Joe Biden literally didn't say another word between now and November, he'd win. Joe Biden is Joe Biden's worst enemy. And Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee. I always say, I'm like, unfucking believable. We have Donald Trump as the president of the United States. The guy already lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. He's the most divisive, unpopular president in a long, long time. And the Democratic Party gave us Joe fucking Biden? You gave us Joe Biden. You got to be kidding me, man. You got to be kidding me. I mean, honestly,
it was Bernie Sanders' time, man.
But you know what? I would have taken anyone. I would have taken Andrew Yang. I think you might have taken Andrew Yang too over Joe Biden. I would have taken Amy Klobuchar. I would have taken Elizabeth Warren. Obviously, I'm a big Bernie Sanders supporter. Obviously, I would have taken Bernie. I would have preferred Bernie over anyone, but I would have taken anybody else in that primary over Joe Biden. And I can't believe that the old political machine that gave Hillary Clinton the goddamn nomination last time around gave Joe Biden. Like, we got to do away with the machine. It obviously doesn't have our interests in mind.
Yeah, and I'm like I'll tell anybody, I care first and foremost about American citizens coming together and being a nation. I care about us getting along. I care about us working together on these issues. We don't always agree, but I'm not about owning the left. I'm not about drinking leftist tears. I'm about having civil conversations and moving forward, because I really think that America is a good force in the world and can be a great force in the world given the right leadership. So it's either we got to get our sides together, both of us, or people going to have to finally get fed up and say, you know what, we're all done with this crap and we're going third party, because like I said,
that's my fantasy. That's my dream, that honest Republican or honest conservatives and honest progressives come together in such numbers and say, we are putting a third party together, and it's going to be about saving the system. And as soon as we take over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we split into two parties under these new civil rules. Money's out of politics. I mean, I honestly think both parties should go away.
Real bipartisanship. Yeah, because there's so much we agree on that we just can't get through all the political hate, and we're getting there. And I think anybody watching this show, anybody who listens to Dogma Debate, anybody's in the polite power movement, these are the types of people that I think, given enough time, are going to really make a difference in this country.
Yeah.
You know? So I appreciate.
You know what? I've never met a Trump supporter I didn't get along with to date. I mean, maybe online I did, but in person, I've never had a one-on-one conversation with a Trump supporter that I didn't like. Hasn't happened yet. It might. Maybe on the street, I'll see some dude, screaming and yelling that I seem like I don't like. But I've never, at a social gathering or something, gotten into a conversation with somebody that I didn't like them. We're still united by so many more things in common than those that divide us. I truly believe that.
Definitely. Well, let's just try to avoid the ending of Godfather 3 with the country.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I'm glad you came and did this, man. I really appreciate it. Wonderful conversation, man. Anyway, you want to plug yourself so anybody can find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at Regilio Michael, or on Instagram at Michael Regilio. And YouTube, I have a channel. I think it's Michael Regilio. And my website is michaelregiliocomedy.com.
Somebody loves himself some him. All right, folks. You came, you heard, you saw. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go check my boy out. Thank you for watching. And next time, we're going to really have a great conversation. We're going to go deep into those two books. So with that being said, come back and see us. And make sure you do it twice. This is the Javier Show.